beautiful life, it looks like. And so now we're going to switch gears a little bit and look at some different other kinds of beauty. And so I'd like to introduce Erika Derkas. She'll be giving our next talk starting momentarily. And just as a reminder, this is homecoming week. And so everybody, put on your purple and get out and enjoy Las Vegas and Highlands Homecoming. And if you haven't already signed up to run the 5K, please do so. And you can do that at alumni@nmhu.edu. And so with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Erika Derkas, who is a professor of sociology and women's studies here at Highlands. And she's recently had a beautiful show where she, after she received her post-baccalaureate certificate in fine arts. So with that, thank you for joining us, Erika.
Thanks, Julie. I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So yeah, good morning. I guess this morning is the art feature. So appreciate Sean's. I don't know if I should leave the subtitles on, the caption on, Julie, or I know Carol's here.
Yeah, I think Carol would like those on. So if that's okay with you. That's
sure.
Okay.
So good morning, welcome, thank you. I think most everyone knows who I am. So, and Julie Julianne went ahead and introduced myself. So, I am presenting today on some work that represents a new direction in research that I'm developing recently. Actually, it's a project that began at the start of COVID, which subsequently was suspended. So now is getting a reboot after its initial inception. So I'm very appreciative for the opportunity to revive this project and speak about women of metal sculpting world. So thank you all for those of you who organized this and invited me to talk today. I focus on the metal artwork of women, particularly those who are creating works as iron casters and metal fabricators. The project originated from casual conversations that I was having with contemporary female cast iron artists. As was mentioned, I just finished the post-baccalaureate program in the fine arts department in sculpture. So I've been going to conferences and iron pours and meeting women who are doing this work. And so I got really jazzed about it. I'll talk about why that is. So I centralize the sculpture work involving iron and steel, but most of these artists are very diverse in their production and their aesthetics. And from its inception, both outsiders and insiders have associated metal with men and masculinity. And some have even maintained that metal culture has been a hostile territory for women. And despite this, a number of female artists and writers have documented, analyzed, and celebrated metal production. And so this discussion provides a preliminary investigation of this phenomenon and what it can reveal about the ever complex, the constant changing relationships between gender and power among artists working in metal. I move beyond simply discussing the importance of female metal artists in terms of representation in a world that historically has been very male-centered and masculinized. So it includes considering what female artists bring to the table from their gendered experience, as well as what they offer in terms of feminine aesthetic. In other words, I'm not just trying to attempt to restore women artists to official histories, so to include those missing histories, but also to capture the diverse, complex, and multiple cultures that impact perspective and material lived experiences. And so this includes language, subjectivity, textuality, aesthetics, the body, visuality, the whole composite of artistic practice and aesthetics. And I chose this piece to kind of represent that because it's clearly has a feminine aesthetic to it, titled Mother City. Today, I focus on 3 artists who are in the international iron casting and metal fabricating community. Ashley Carlisle, Diala Aldegalis, and Merritt Davis. And Ashley's resides in the US, Diala is in Jordan, and Merritt is in Wales. So I'll turn to Ashley first. And she is exhibited throughout the United States, Italy, London. She's originally from New Orleans. She got earned her MFA in sculpture from the University of Georgia, and she's currently a professor in art in sculpture at the University of Wyoming. And she's also a member of the Western Cast Iron Art Association. The art of the featured women reveal a diversity in terms of the working methods that they use. It also includes a diversity in the materials that range from organic or degradable material that's often mixed with iron and steel. Like this, what's this first piece? This is called Cradle, and this is iron that is has embedded within it fiber, and then wood piece that is situated at the top of this. Some of the artists that I look at turn outwards to unbound nature, while others turn inwards to their own bodies, and some kind of oscillate between different approaches and choose to situate themselves within a multiple disparate settings. And Ashley is one who uses this mixture of degradable material with iron and steel in a way that speaks to and reflects a certain relationship with the natural environment. This piece is called Catch and Release, and this is a cast bronze piece mixed with paper. She uses a lot of paper, cast paper in her work, mixed with iron. And she creates art using drawing and sculpture that speak to how animals of all types disperse due to natural and environmental factors. She produces work that provides visual guidance when confronting often uncomfortable issues, but also she offers reassurance when dealing with things that are inevitable. This piece, for instance, is more direct in its conversation with environmental issues. This is called Reclaimed. It's a mixed media piece, stands about 14 inches by 9 inches. And it's one of her most recent pieces created in 2022. And in her words, she says, this work was created to talk about sagebrush reclamation or lack thereof by the pipeline companies. They're killing our prairies. And though they have to plant seedlings, they don't have to make sure the seedlings survive. And over 500 species count on sagebrush in our Wild West. So this one is pretty direct in its message. Her work often also creates immersive experiences. And so she's bringing the viewer into an environment where there's a transformation, both of the physical space that could bring forth a transformation of emotional and thoughtful space. The viewer becomes a participant, sometimes a witness of sorts, and then comes out of that experience with her art, with that space, perhaps temporarily altered by the momentary physical, thoughtful separation from the norm. And she says, here's another piece that's very interactive as well. She says, I ask the viewer to remember this moment as they are making a transition in their lives and positively reflect on the journey and experience itself versus where it may end. Her work speaks very personally to her own trajectories and the place that she has settled in, where she experiments and refines her work. Again, in her words, we're asked at times to volunteer to make a transition, to disseminate from one place to another, or from one moment to another. The Western landscape is vast and varied, diverse at every view, and it continues to penetrate the seeds I choose and the moving pictures I present. And if you look closely at the seed pod, she's got an embedded little iron window in this. And, you know, one symbolically can see the representation of home, a space, a sense of rebirth, looking inward. These seed pods show up a lot in her work and are very representative of her own transitions that she's made. And more specifically, she's got quite a few pieces that speak about migration. Again, in her words, she says, I myself am a transplant, something that can resonate with a lot of us here in New Mexico. I am a transplant within the West, so it's easy to create a dimensional snapshot of a journey where the wind decides where you are going and where you may end up. I do this within each sculpture, drawing, or installation, creating a set where the viewer is asked to imagine as a child and place themselves in a seed being dispersed by chance or by choice. There's no end, but a constant movement towards something. And again, if you look closely at some of these seed pods, they have doors or windows embedded within the pod and representing transition and relocation. I'm very much inspired by Ashley's work. It resonates with me and my own sensibility towards the natural environments. The next artist is Diala Aldegelis. She's currently lecturing. She's a lecturer at the University of Jordan. She's a design and marketing manager of Café de Ceramica. She graduated with her MFA in sculpture from Fort Hays in Kansas in 2015. And she currently resides in Jordan and hopefully is going to be our next Balance Scholar in spring 2023. So yeah, we're really excited. Hopefully it'll all work out and come together. She'll be here on campus. The works of Diala Aldegelis inhabit a different sensibility than that of Ashley's, in that the works speak more to the aesthetic autonomy of the artwork. There's a distinct relationship between viewer and object that's created through this autonomy. The forms that she creates are independent, and in much the same way that like a human body can claim space, her pieces do so in the space of sculpture. And so this kind of frees the viewer to make connections with a piece that can be really powerful and challenging, because they're less literal in their representation. So again, it kind of creates a more inward introspection with the viewer and the artwork. And like Ashley's installations, Diala's installations also offer the viewer the ability to walk around her pieces and in some cases even walk into them. And so thus the artwork provides a moment of stasis in a world that's perpetually in motion. Her works cause pause. They cause an opportunity for contemplation. And for instance, in some of these larger pieces, she states, in most of my work, you find patterns, either painted on the sculpture or carved out of them. Those patterns are the abstract result of images and memories in my head. Each pattern in line or curve carries a story or a memory that I hold within me. I look at them as if they're little whispered secrets of stories between me and my pieces. And that is what I want people to have between them and my sculptures, a close friend who they can share their secrets with. I think it's always beautiful to hear the words of the artist in terms of how they interpret their relationship with the work, but also recognizing that once you produce the work and you put it out there, then it's a gift, right, to the viewers to have their own relationship with. But it's nice to contextualize it with their own kind of sensibility. And this whole notion of evoking or potentially evoking memory and emotion is very formative for Diala. She's a Palestinian artist. She living in Jordan. So her cultural heritage as displaced by occupation of Palestine and her living in the diaspora is a focal point of the sculpture's intrinsic purpose. Her objects acquire meaning that are peripheral to their inanimate reality through the beliefs and ideologies imposed on them. And again, in her words, she states, "My work strives to bring a voice to the seemingly voiceless of Palestine, bringing in questions of homeland, displacement, and separation. My work is an ongoing connection with my heritage, a reminder to never forget who you are and where you come from." And she goes into more discussion about this. Her father only had 18 years of his 72 years of life, knowing the meaning of home. He was forcefully uprooted from Palestine. And she states that at that moment, it changed everything for him. The injustice bore heavily on his youth, his dreams, and his choices. And as the years passed and countries that he traveled, the meals of za'atar and olive oil were cooked, stories of his homeland, his parents were told. And my father, Mohammed, she says, has since built a new life for himself and our family. So that really resonates. So this whole notion of like old traditions, the spirit of tribe, the beliefs, superstitions, taboos become a kind of focal point for an object that she creates. And so it inhabits a realm that is otherly, I guess, and very much a concern for herself, but also brings forth a sense of personal aspiration and revelation in the work that she does. So the next artist that I feature is Merritt Davis, and Merritt is resides in Wales, and she is she got her BA in sculpture. She graduated with honors, first in her class, from Carmarthen School of Art in Britain. Much of her work is inspired and includes farm implements. The farmland is very central to her work as it represents a dear place in her history. Upon close inspection, the work often reveals nuanced aspects that relate to her worldview. For instance, in this case, it seems there's this severity in terms of the geometric forms, but they also are psychologically charged in that the world of metal can appear very menacing and heavy, but through the works of a lot of these female artists, they can make it read in a very delicate fashion as it simultaneously appears threatening. And I think that this piece is reminiscent of that, and it almost appears like a tapestry in the way that she presents it. Such images are evocative, and for some, a centralized general theme is really apparent, and for others, it's much more subtle and nuanced. My goal of this project is to capture the territories of these artists in order to enhance our understanding of gender dynamics in a general sense, but specifically within the art world, and even more so in terms of determining whether or not you can really speak to a feminine aesthetic. All of the works, this is Ashley's work again. All of these works are independent forms, but also some of them are a succession of encounters that hold up, in some respects, a mirror that exposes the multitude of life's facets, nuances, and paradoxes. I see artistic expression as a way to not only enhance visibility, but to evoke dialogue. It deepens, for some of these artists, a sense of resistance to kind of standardized ways of understanding art, doing art, producing art, operating within an art arena. And some of them are more related to activism, and speak to a dialogue between communities. And I would argue that Diala's work is kind of situated there. Female artists are forging the dialogue about gender and representation by building on the power of art. And again, I would argue that it's one of the most effective cultural change tools that we have. So this project seeks to capture complexity, and again is nascent, so it's definitely a work in progress. And I truly love speaking with these artists and hearing their perspective beyond just, again, a relationship that's created between the viewer and the work themselves, the work itself. So these are the three that they focused on for this discussion, but there are many who have kind of, dare I say, forged their way in the iron world and are really pioneers in this. It's a small community to begin with, and a tight community, and so the work that the women are doing warrants attention from my perspective. I'll take any questions or comments.
Well, Erica, I think you're very generous to, put the spotlight on these other artists who inspire you. But your work should be right there with them. Are you planning to show any of your personal work?
I don't have anything for this. I kind of wanted to highlight some of the women that really have been active and the mothers of of some of this. I mean, there's earlier women I think that can be highlighted, but I feel kind of new to the game. So, but thanks, Julie. That's really kind of you, generous of you too.
I do have a question. You mentioned at one point that I think it was maybe with the first artist, Ashley, that she combines paper and ironwork. You don't mean like when the metal is being poured that there's paper involved, or the paper comes after?
Well, there are artists that do combustible works and have material in their molds that are poured. Ashley usually, from what I understand, does that after the fact. So she'll have the ironworks and then molded paper that she'll insert in the piece. But yeah, it's a good question. Those combustible pieces are a performance in and of themselves, and can be quite exciting and dangerous at the same time. Yeah, Sean.
Actually, Mary had her hand raised before I.
Oh, sorry.
Mary. Sure. Sean, you are so sweet and a great colleague. Thank you. Erica, I'm really curious from like a sociopolitical perspective, right? Are you seeing the work in this area and its globalization, right? Artists coming together across different countries, different perspectives as a movement that could gain some ground post-COVID. Do you know where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I do. And like I said, I think that because it's a small community to begin with, the iron casters, it there's a lot of connection and collaboration and dialogue that already happens within that community. And so I know, like I said, I kind of came to this, just kind of stumbled, although I'm in gender and women's studies, so of course it was going to be something that I would zero in on. But I was at a place called Sloss Furnaces in Birmingham, and they had a feminist pour there at the exhibition, and I kind of inserted myself and jumped on, and it was great. They had really kind of domesticated symbolic material possessions and furniture and domestic spaces, and we just poured molten iron over top of them. And there was so many kind of symbolic moments in the pour itself, in terms of kind of burning up these spaces, but then also just it was an all-women's crew. We ran the furnace, and we had a few technical glitches, but which was like, we're trying to validate ourselves. And but it's a very sympathetic group too. I mean, there's a lot of women have grown a great deal in the iron community, and that's because there is a great deal of recognition for what women bring to the table and what they're doing. I mean, it's a very masculine space, which means that a lot of the women get to express that part of themselves. And there's a I hate to make this kind of biological determinism, but you have to speak about it. There, a lot of the women that are there on the cruise are little petite women, and they're holding their own, and pouring ladles that are 50 pounds, 80 pounds. And it's exciting to see that as to see the role models. But then again, bringing metal is such a hard substance and so much part of industry, and yet there is a kind of female aesthetic that emerges out of that becomes a site to talk about gender dynamics. And like I said, some of it's really, really overt and in your face, and some of it is much more subtle, and comes out less from kind of a political standpoint, if you will, and more just a sensibility of being a gendered body, right?
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mary. Sean.
No, I don't know how I heard, but I was really pleasantly surprised to find out you were doing casting and metalwork. And I'm curious what got you into that to begin with. You've kind of touched on some of it, but on a personal note, what made you decide to don a hot suit and stand
Sure.
around a flame?
And join the herd, if you will. We always make jokes about how much leather we're wearing out on the floor. We look like cattle. But yeah, I'm indebted to David Lobdell. My father was an artist, and so I always kind of traverse those roads momentarily, but always kind of had that those blocks and those myths about artists never being able to really make it in the world. And so it was more hobbyish for me. And when David, one day I had ceramic work, and he said, "Oh, I can fire that for you, and you should come to the foundry." And that was it. And it's an unsung resource that we have, this incredible foundry, the Iron Tribe. I just, I'm always kind of lamenting in some ways that it's not, we tend to do this though. We don't, sing enough about it, what the work that we do ourselves. And I think that David's created something that has international notoriety, and he's very connected. So I never pictured myself doing iron. I never even thought about it, but it's definitely I credit being here and having that exposure.
I also have to agree with Julie. I think you chose some really thoughtful, interesting pieces to talk about from some interesting artists, but one of these days I'd like to see what you're doing too.
Well, behind me is
I
one of my
figured
pieces.
that.
So I guess in a way I am, showing off my work. So
Well, thank you.
thanks, Sean.
It looks like Eric Romero has a question.
Dr. Romero. We can't see you though, Dr. Romero. We can only see your forehead.
Good morning, Doctora. Thank you for sharing. I got a question just in listening to the presentation. I'm wondering if there's any kind of articulation or juxtaposition, at least here in New Mexico, or a transfer of silversmithing into the iron, into the metals, the ironworks. Because again, I'm supposing and assuming that in New Mexico, that at least the silversmithing is a little bit more gender neutral, particularly in Native American communities. And if there's any kind of inkling or inclination, that silversmith goes into a different venue of metal and starts working with the ironworks, and therefore would be more of that gender neutrality of production.
I have to just claim my ignorance on this one. I don't know much about the silversmithing in New Mexico. I know that a lot of people argue that iron is a gender neutral space because, well, in one way, symbolically, when you put on your leathers, nobody knows, you just become another hand on the floor to operate. But and it is a very inviting space. I mean, from someone who, feminist theorizing about this, we come to that space also through our gendered experience. And so it's not only the experience within those spaces where production happens, right? It's the spaces that you occupy and experience getting there that has an impact on your aesthetic, or has an impact on the opportunities that are open to you. And also, the stuff that we internalize as well, in terms of recognizing what our own potential is, seeing ourselves in those spaces. I think, again, it's has historically focused in because of the demands. I mean, it is a physically demanding enterprise, whether it is in industry or whether it's in the artistic world. So, I mean, I have lots of stories about it, but yeah, I think that, there's different ways that we can talk about gender in terms of the art that's being produced. Like I said, I think that it's the pioneers in iron casting have really neutralized gender, as you said. And really created spaces for women to express themselves, but that doesn't eliminate the experiences that some of these women have in those spaces. And Diala is in Jordan. She is the only woman in Jordan with an MFA in metal sculpture. So she's constantly being challenged in terms of her legitimacy in that space. But she's amazing and good-natured and has humor, and she just does it. she doesn't let that temper at all her work that she does, but she does. I think that probably inspires her to speak more kind of directly to those issues. I know I didn't answer your question really, because I don't have an answer for it.
That was a good answer, though.
Okay. Thanks.
Are there other questions for Dr. Derkas?
Actually, could I take advantage and ask another level of question? I'm also fascinated with the performance aspect. Again, when Iron Tribe comes to town, that's a spectacle. And hopefully it comes about now in post-COVID activity, we get to see that light show again. So please make sure that when the pouring comes about, that there be a larger public sharing during the production aspect, so we could see those sparkles again.
Indeed. And Iron Tribe is coming up in spring 2023. And we are again in the process of writing the ballot proposal to bring Diala for that show. So the plan is to have her here 2 weeks prior to Iron Tribe, and then she'll be our keynote. And again, if everything aligns and we get funded, and she'll be a participant in the performance, which as Dr. Romero pointed out, is the nighttime performance is a spectacle. And then also in the pour itself on Saturday that follows that conference. So yeah, I'll be sure to let everybody know. David too.
Dr. Eric, did you have another question?
Yes, it's kind of a question and an invitation, Erica, if that's okay for me to put
Please.
into one. Okay, so part of my history is the healing effects of the arts on youth. And I did work in that area in New Haven, Connecticut for well over 15 years. I'm curious, the embodiment aspect of the arts, especially arts in this field, this genre, I think they have like really interesting implications into mental health for youth. And I'm curious if you and your colleagues and your herd, I loved that. That was great. Have ever thought about, are there ways in which this could translate, like say into high school or middle school curricula?
Yeah, it's a great question, and great. I mean, there's, as you know, right, a whole subgenre, some fields of art therapy that are interdisciplinary, right? They are, I should say, transdisciplinary. They're in psychology, they're in education, they're in social work, in fine art. And actually, Diala has a certification in art therapy. And again, one of the projects would be to do a workshop here at Highlands. Yeah, I think that art on so many levels has that potential. And I know a lot of artists who do work in this arena to open people up, right? I mean, it has that potential to create space for introspection, to heal. And to create something that you can, that, you know, becomes a material possession that you can always reflect on, right? In terms of that kind of conversation, that dialogue that's created when you make something. I think that there's just so much power in that. And you see, I can go back in one of the pictures, Ashley always works with especially with young people, to bring them to her spaces, her installations. Oh, I don't know what, where am I? I'm going forward, I'm going back. Where she brings the kids in. Now they're not producing the work in this scenario, but they're interacting with it. And I think, you know, that is indelible in our psyche. You know, it just I think that there's just so much potential in using art for transformation, for healing and dealing with trauma. I mean, a lot of Indigenous artists talk about this, right? Again, it as an artist, you gift it to the public once it's produced too, you know. It's and some of those conversations, some of the embedded meanings and messages are really clear in the work, and others, you know, take a moment for us to contemplate. But the potential is there, and I see so much that art can do for enhancing our well-being individually and through community too.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
And I would love to please invite, let's talk about some collaborations that can be done.
We will.
Yeah, good. Juliana, I love these moments, these opportunities to talk about because we get to know each other through our discussions, and so much comes out of, I think, these presentations. They're wonderful.
Well, I just had an observation to make that, you know, yesterday we had 5 or 6 talks, and, you know, it might have just been that it was the first day, but I think people were reluctant to ask questions. But with this morning already, with, you know, Sean's photography and now your sculpture, there's a lot more interaction. And I think maybe it's just, you know, art is a way that we can all feel like we can be involved in some way, and you know, ask a question and not feel like, oh no, maybe that was a dumb question. But, you know, so I appreciate that maybe this is opening up some dialogue that other subjects don't always.
Yeah, and really resonates with what Mary was saying, right, about its potential. So I think usually during the Iron Tribe too, there's always an opportunity for folks to come and make sand, we call them sand blocks, where you can etch into sand molds that are created, and it, you know, it's exciting. I know that Ashley and her husband do this in Laramie. We spend sometimes hours just doing scratch blocks for the community. They come in but it's a great interactive bonding, you know, moment for folks. They sit and they create together, they watch them pour together, and they break them out of their molds together. And, you know, and again, for people who don't necessarily think that they have creative potential, it's amazing some of the works that are produced, and I think we all can tap into that. So
Do we have other questions, or should we let Dr. Derkas get on with the rest of her day?
yeah, Ruth is one that was in the Foundry. Thanks, Ruth, for this. She spent time. I mean, again, that's another wonderful opportunity for us when we're to work here at Highlands, is we get these extended these opportunities to take classes and open up whole new worlds.
Definitely one of the benefits of working at a university.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much, Erica. And this has been great.
Thanks
And,
again, Julian.
we'll just sign you up next year
Okay,
already.
that's good.
All right. Thanks, everyone.